Maybe it's just me, but it feels like there is a lot of meanness going on in the world right now. Brokenness and meanness every time we go online, access the latest news feeds, meanness when we drive on the freeway, go to stores, go to work, and sometimes, sadly, even when we go to our churches. There are days when just getting through my email is exhausting, with petition after petition to sign, reading about the new horrors and the continuing horrors we commit against our planet, animals, and each other. Just this past week, the United States Department of the Interior released a landmark report detailing decades of atrocities committed against Native American communities through 408 boarding schools, federally run, but some also run by churches, and the United Methodist Church is one of them. From 1819 to 1969, hundreds of Native children were removed from their parents and made to endure a multitude of atrocities and indignities. It is a painfully broken history for our country, and it's a heavy burden for our Native American siblings to have to bear. This past week, in a racially motivated act, 10 people were murdered by an 18-year-old with a gun in a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. The shooter believed that the color of his skin gave him the right to murder, and he cited racist talking points from a well-known media personality. This is the brokenness we see all around us. And so we sign petitions. We stand up against injustice with our votes and with our voices. We vow to use less single-use plastics. We try to conserve water. But what about those micro and macro aggressions we experience? The meanness of words said whose sole intention is to cause harm or to let another know that they are not welcome. How do we love when there are times when we can't even be civil to each other? I don't like it when it feels like everything in our world is broken. It's hard. It's painful. Writer Madelleine wrote in her book, Walking on Water, I look back at my mother's life and I see suffering deepening and strengthening it. In some people, I have also seen it destroy. Pain is not always creative. Received wrongly, it can lead to alcoholism and madness and suicide. Nevertheless, without it, we do not grow. The writer of Psalm 31 wrote, I have become like a broken vessel. At times it feels like the entire world has become like a broken vessel. So what do we do when we're broken? Years ago, at my first appointment, I was preparing for a church-wide meeting, and in small churches, that usually included cleaning and vacuuming before people arrived, and sometimes taking part in food preparation because there just weren't enough people to do it. It was an informal meeting, so I did not change into my normal pastoral ensemble minutes before people arrived. I just stayed how I was dressed, casually, informally, but neatly, and I thought I looked kind of nice. Anyway, the meeting went well. My district superintendent was there, and the room looked great, and the hospitality of the food and the people were overflowing. I was feeling pretty good. My district superintendent was excited about the direction that we were heading in, and it was one of those moments where you just say to yourself, all is well. But a week or so after the meeting, I got a phone call telling me a church member who had been at the meeting called another church member and said that he and his wife were leaving the church because they didn't approve of the way I was dressed at the meeting. They disapproved of the way I was dressed. They didn't think I was dressed formally enough, that I was disrespectful, not over anything I had said or done or proposed, but because in their opinion I wasn't dressed up enough. And just to clarify, I was not dressed like this. I actually had pants without holes in them and a long sleeve shirt. This couple never ever spoke to me directly about their feelings. They called others and told them to tell me, but they wouldn't respond to my phone calls, to my emails, or to my letters. It was like 1 minute I was their pastor, working together to feed the hungry and house the unsheltered, and the next minute, I was being called names and secondhand told how disrespectful I was. And the funny thing was that my boss, the district superintendent, and most of the attendees at the meeting were dressed like I was, modest, casual. It hurt. It hurt a lot. And I had to wonder, if I were a male pastor, would that incident have even taken place? Well, the bullying and the meanness continued until the couple finally made good on their threat to leave the church and take their money with them. I wanted to shout out at them, out of all of the things you could have chosen about me that you could complain about or find fault with, because there are a lot of them, you chose to lift up how I was dressed. What about the love that we had given freely to each other, the support poured into cups when their cups were empty? And you bring up how I was dressed and are being this mean-spirited. Well, did I say a few choice words about how I felt to my closest family and friends? And I will admit that yes, I did, which is not something I'm proud of. And so I sat with that pain for a long time. And in that sitting with that pain, I learned that I can't control another's choices. I can only control my responses, my actions, my choices. When I want to strike back, I try to remember that hatred and meanness come out of fear and brokenness. And I remember that I don't want to be as mean or meaner than the person who caused the pain in the first place. A lot of the time I fail. I totally miss the mark. I'm a jerk. But I try to find the places where I can grow a little bit, learn a little bit, and celebrate the times when I don't say something mean, when I don't lash out, when I try to live into Jesus' new commandment from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, love one another. And you're to love one another the way I have loved you. This is how all will know that you are my disciples, that you truly love one another. I take a lot of comfort from the disciples. They didn't get it right, a lot. And yet, Jesus chose them to carry on his work after he was gone. I find that hopeful. Jesus tells the disciples and us that the way people will know his followers will be by the love they show to each other and to the world. Jesus' instructions on love is a tipping point for the disciples. Journalist and writer Malcolm Gladwell's description of a tipping point is this: the tipping point is that magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses a threshold, tips, and spreads like wildfire. This command given by Jesus should be our tipping point. Love pouring out, love being the way we are recognized as followers of Christ. This is one of the most famous verses in the New Testament. Jesus' new commandment to love one another as I have loved you is a commandment for his early followers, and it is a commandment for us today. This commandment, this Jesus who washes the feet of his friends, who walks and eats with outcasts and sinners, who loves. He was the tipping point for the first disciples, and he should be the tipping point for us. But it's funny, this new commandment really isn't particularly new. Commands to love are found throughout the Old Testament. As one of my favorite commentaries points out, well, what's new here then must be in the second phrase, as I have loved you. Jesus has just provided his disciples with an example of how he loves them. He has just washed their feet. When Jesus bends down to wash his disciples' feet, it's a tipping point of social status, prestige, and power. Jesus shows us a kind of dignifying love. I am not greater than you. You are not less than me. I do not call you servants. I call you friends. This is the tipping point. Pay attention. I'm not going to be with you much longer. Love as I have loved you, making friends, not servants, building bridges between the labels, getting rid of above and below, insider, outsider. Jesus kept loving when everything was against him. He chose to keep giving when so many refused the gifts he offered. In her book, The Cup of Our Life, Joyce Rupp tells the story of a woman who was in a deep depression. She had no energy. She was beaten up constantly with negative thoughts about herself. Joyce writes, one day, she found enough strength to listen to her pain. The pieces of her cup of life began to teach her, and she started to mend. The memory of her brokenness helped her to accept the balance of life with its joy and its sorrow. She learned that both joy and sorrow are a part of the process of growth, and that each has something significant to bring into her life. Writer Macrina Wiederkehr shared, in the midst of my sorrows, there is always room for joy. Joy and sorrows are sisters. They live in the same house. We are living in a time of great sorrow. We recently passed the 1 million COVID deaths in the United States marker. There's a war going on in Ukraine. Cruelty is everywhere in our politics and in our laws. Well, the early disciples had times of struggle and sorrow. We have times of struggle and sorrow. But like those disciples, we also experience times of joy. Hopefully those times of joy are too numerous for us to count. When it seems like this love that we are supposed to be known by is being crushed by meanness and brokenness, it's still there. It was there when Pope Francis, as one of his first public acts as Pope, washed and kissed the feet of 12 inmates at a youth prison on Maundy Thursday. And those 12 included 2 women and 2 Muslims. Jesus' new commandment is there when we put aside our divisions and our politics and we welcome refugees. Joy is there. Anytime we pour love into another's empty cup through acts that build bridges and brings a divided world closer together, even if just for a moment, we embody Jesus' new commandment, and the joy is there. When we spend time with aspects of our brokenness and fragments of the world's brokenness, we may discover how it has been or can be a teacher for our growth, a tipping point towards healing and pouring love out into the world. Not some domesticated Sunday mornings only kind of love, but the love that Christ commands of us, a surprising, subversive love in the face of the world's brokenness and meanness. A love that will strengthen us in times of joy and in times of great sorrow. This new commandment will keep our anger from becoming meanness. Keep our hearts soft enough to keep breaking. Keep our anger turned towards justice and not cruelty. This new commandment reminds us that all of life, every bit of it, is for love. So may we stay fiercely kind. May we be known by our love. Be kind.